Thank you. So, welcome all to our presentation today about the EMS Market Analysis Europe 2024. My name is Christoph Solka, and this is my colleague Dr. Haass. I am from the Global Electronics Association, as you can see on the logo down on the left-hand side. And my colleague is from Informa. On the right-hand side, you can see the logo. And we cooperate on the market analysis for the EMS market.
Okay, og jeg siger også hjerteligt velkommen til vores præsentation. Vi börjar med at ge några siffror om Europa i allmänheten och sen nordiska länder och Sverige. Christoph börjar.
So, first of all, I would like to show you one slide, and you maybe have seen this slide before. We show it all the time. So what you can see here is there are 2,350 EMS in the European Union, and 2,313 we identified and analyzed. And important here is that each legal entity is separately counted. So those 2,313 separate legal entities belong to 1,826 companies. So I told you we always show this slide. Why do we show it always? Because those numbers are changing over time. There is company closings, actually, new companies open up. So on the top right-hand side, there is like a date, and you can see how current the data is. And what we saw in the recent time is that we had several closures and insolvencies in Germany. However, we also saw some new openings in the eastern part of the European Union, in Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. In the middle, Germany with 548 companies, Sweden 71, France 391, and so on. So it's a changing landscape, and it needs to be constantly updated, but we cover them pretty wholesomely. Today, we would like to talk about the market. And to do so, we do a half-year survey. So what we show, it's very recent data. We recently did this survey, and we surveyed in total 219 legal entities, which represent 177 companies, EMS companies in Europe. And we also additionally added 5 public EMS to round up the picture here. And those companies, we sent out surveys and asked for their data. And in the first half year of 2025, they did around 4.5 billion euros revenue. In 2024, in total, it was around 11 billion. And in 2025, the expected revenue is going to be 10.9 billion, so a little bit lower than they did in the year before. What is also important to know is when we analyze the companies, it makes sense to differentiate between the big ones and the small ones. So we split the companies in companies above 50 million euro revenue and below 50 million euro revenue. And when you see, okay, it's a typical distribution, there are less companies which are big, so 60 here in this survey, and more 159 who are below the 50 million. And percentage-wise, the bigger ones make 27.4%, but those are responsible for 77.2% of the revenues of the survey, and the smaller ones are responsible for 22.8% of the revenues. So few big, a lot of revenue, many small, little revenue, typical distribution. And to already show you a little bit of advantage, so when we look at these two groups closer, the revenue of the first half 2025 declined year over year 6.6% for the bigger ones and minus 12.7% for the smaller ones. So both groups declined actually. And when we look at the right top side, at the red circle, we see, okay, the total revenue share. German companies made 50% of this revenue. Then there is Central Eastern Europe. Then there is the Western Europe countries without Netherlands, France, and DACH. Then we have France with 8%, Belgium 7%, Switzerland 5.5%, and Austria 7%. And okay, we did a half-year survey. So therefore, we look at the half years, of course. And if you look at the bottom of the columns, you see, okay, the left column is the first half year of 2024, then the second half year, of course, then the first year 2025, and then the second half of 2025, and there you see a little E. That means it's estimated, it's a forecast. However, this forecast is very accurate as these numbers are already in the books of the companies. And if you look at the right-hand side axis, we see the countries again. So Germany, big blue, then above is Austria, Switzerland, Benelux, Netherlands, France, rest of Western Europe, and Central Eastern Europe. And now what is interesting is if we look how these columns developed over time. So at the very top you see the revenues, and then from the first half year 2024 to the second half year 2024, there was a big decline, minus 10.8% what we saw. And then from the second half year to the first year, so to currently, we saw a slight plus of 3.1%, and then the estimated revenue is a plus 0.9% for the second half of the year. So we see, first is a downtrend, pretty steep, and then it's slightly recovering and then staying pretty flat actually. However, this is not the same, so not all countries develop the same. For example, if we look at Germany, it was a very steep decline, then a little bit of recovery, and then pretty much staying flat. A different picture is shown if we look, for example, at Switzerland or at France. So they also had a big decline, but then they jumped up again in the second year of 2025 to double-digit growth, and an estimated close to double-digit growth also in the second half of the year. So we see this downturn to momentum, but then it splits a little bit how it's going to develop until the rest of the year. Having given you this overview, now I would like to go a little bit more into detail, showing you this big loaded slide here. So this is more detail for all of those countries. And again, here on top of the right-hand, on the top line on the right side, we see the half years. So first change second half year to first half year 2024, then the first half year 2025, year over year, so to say, then the first half year to the second year, and so on. And pretty important, at the right-hand side, what you see on the very right is the whole 2025, so estimated versus 2024. I would like to pick you here some examples which are important in our opinion. So year over year, we saw a big decline of minus 8.1% for all countries. Germany, quite big, Belgium, Netherlands as well, France as well, Central Eastern Europe. And then, however, as we saw previously on the slide, it changes, and then into the second year in the first half of 2025, if we look, for example, to the column next to it, first half year 2025 versus the second half, we see, it's slowing down, it's slightly improving. We see some growth in Germany, and this previously mentioned stronger growth in Belgium, Netherlands, France, and also with the public EMS, which we included in here as well. And then for a year-over-year perspective, so the total year, we see, it splits. Germany, Austria will further go down in total. However, in other countries, it's recovering. And what we saw, in total, we had a strong downturn in 2024, but in 2025 we already see light at the end of the tunnel, and there is some hope already, especially what we see with the strong growth in the countries like Switzerland, Netherlands, and so on. What is also important, first we saw revenue numbers, and now we look into the order backlog and into the inventory. On the left-hand side of the slide, we see the order backlog. And that means how many orders the company received at this point of time, basically in the first half year 2025, and compared to the end of the year 2024. And we see, the orders are going down mostly, split into companies again, bigger 50 million or below 50 million. The bigger ones, seen, for example, Germany minus 3.5%. For the big companies, for the smaller companies, minus 4.1%. However, we also see very strong growth again in the order backlog for the countries like France, Western Europe without the Benelux lands and DACH and so on. And if you look into the total change of order backlog, it was negative with a minus 1.7%, with some exceptions. And then on the right-hand side, you see the change in inventory. This is negative, however, a negative thing, a negative value can be a good thing actually. So when we look here for all of them, for the small ones, for the big ones, and in total, the inventory reduced pretty significantly. So minus 6.6% for the bigger ones, minus 7% for the smaller ones. And in total, we saw a change with minus 6.7% in the inventory. There was just one positive value, which you see in the very right down corner, but this is like one country which had a little bit of an exception. And we already saw the forecast for the second half of 2025. Now looking at the book-to-bill ratio. So it's bookings to billings basically. And when we look at Germany, okay, above 1 it's positive, it means extraction, below 1 is negative. So the values are all around 1 or a 1, covered around 1. So for Germany, it's a little below. Austria, very negative. Actually, it always depends a little bit on the industry of the country and of the political environment and the industries which are covered by the EMS companies. So for example, automotive industry can play a role here in Austria. In Switzerland, it's very positive, close to 1.2. Belgium, Netherlands, pretty flat. France also very positive. And the rest is very close to 1 actually, and in total we see 0.98 here.
Okay, so in our half-year survey, besides the figures we asked for, we also asked for a special question. Last year we asked for the numbers of SMT lines at the companies, and this year at the actual situation, we asked for the current order situation. And the companies had 5 possibilities to answer. Yes, very good, good, satisfactory, bad, or very poor. And this diagram now shows all the participants who answered. And also here again, the split in 50 millions more revenues and less. And as you could see, more than half of the companies who answered are satisfied with the order situation. You do not see really a differentiation between the bigger and the smaller companies. If you see the very good, there are 9% of the bigger ones, 6 of the less companies with less revenues, but then if you switch to good, it's vice versa. So you can't say in total the picture is looking the same for all the companies. We also analyzed it for the Western and Eastern Europe companies, and even there the figures are nearly the same as before. Also, half of them in total and in West are satisfied. But if you then look at the East companies, the situation there is worse. 35% say the situation is bad, there are no orders coming in, and very poor 9%, also more than in general or in Western Europe. And you also maybe saw the figures before. Also there was a big minus for the Eastern companies. And normally the Eastern companies are the work bank for Western European EMS companies. So, and we was wondering, because to produce there is cheaper. So why are the figures in Eastern Europe not so good as in Western Europe? And we asked some of the EMS companies, and the answer we got was, it is easier to shut down stuff in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe. So they took the production and relocated some of the orders from Eastern Europe to Western Europe to use the production, the stuff there. This is why the situation in Eastern Europe is worse than in Western Europe. Now we have a look at the Nordic countries, and the Nordic countries have a share of 5.9 from the general European revenue market share. To compare that, Germany as one of the biggest markets, together with the Czech Republic and Hungary, has a share of 15.6. And as you can see, the situation, the development has been quite different since 2013, with some up and downs. But in general, you saw up to 2023 a growth. Yeah, not in 2020, but this is the corona pandemic, and you see for every country the same gap there. Yeah, but then same situation as in whole Europe. The demand and the orders are missing, so there is -6% for the Nordic countries in total. And if you see Denmark there, they have a higher minus at the other countries. And this is due to the fact that Eltvin relocated their production mostly to Poland. And if you take out the figures from Eltvin from 2023 and 2024, the minus is only 4.7. So this is something who falls the result a little bit. Finland was the only country at the corona pandemic who could have little growth, and this was due to the fact that Norrtron and Westcontrol could grow at this time. Little bit unusual. Okay, now the top list, 20 for the Nordic countries. And as you can see, 6 of the 8 Nordic public countries are under the top 10, together with Sanmina, headquartered in the USA, and then followed by Therma Aerostructures from Denmark and Westcontrol from Norway. And the top 10 has a market share of nearly 60%. If you take the top 20, we are up to nearly 80%. And we have in total 157 legal entities in the Nordic countries, belonging to 119 different companies. So that means that nearly 100 companies have to share the remaining 10%. The top list for Sweden. And at the top 1 to 6, you see the same names as before, but in another ranking. And then followed by Aros Electronics. It's a Swedish company, but owned by a Belgian industry group, who also have some other participations in electronics. Sanmina, you saw it before or heard it before. And then it's followed by some Swedish companies, Remaster and Löwanger Electronics. The top 10 has a market share of 25%. And if you take the top 11 to 20 on top on it, we have a market share of 90% for the top 20 off. And here is already some gap on the map before, of Europe map you saw 2021, and here is 22. So we already get some again into the list, because on my list it was 22. So the list is changing all the time. Yeah, and these 22 companies belongs to 60, legal entities belongs to 60 different companies. The decline was minus 2.9% in Sweden in euro and 3.0% in Swedish crowns. If you have a look at the revenues in euro, the gap, the minus for 2018, I would explain on the next foil. But you see, without the small gap for Corona, until 2023, there was a steadily growth for Sweden. And now the minus of 2.9. If you look at the revenues in Swedish crowns, and I have put the development in the percentual development in euro under the graphic, you see that there is no minus in 2018. So there's plus 2.4 and we have minus 4.5 in euros. So this is currency conversion, nothing else. Yeah, and then the gap is a little bit more in Swedish crowns. We converse all the country currencies. Otherwise, we couldn't compare all the countries with each other. Number of employees. Yeah, you could see that it already before Corona, it was going slightly down a little bit. And it was a big rise, a big gap at Corona time, but then a good rise after it. And this is mostly due to the public companies who build up a lot of employees and stuff again. For the last year, there was a minus in staff again, but luckily not as big as we see the gap in the revenues. Revenue per head, even there with some up and downs, but you see a growing, and if you take the 10 years period, you can see that beginning of 2014, we had 260,000, 270,000 revenue per head, and now we are up to 290,000. We also track the merger acquisitions and closing in whole Europe. And these are the 43 transactions in the last 5.5 years for the Nordic countries. And we had 10 closures or insolvencies. This is a light blue part of the graphic, and rest of it are the acquisitions. And it started 2019 with significantly acquisitions of from the big public EMS companies. And as you can see in the right corner, 23 of 33 of the merchant acquisitions came from the big 5 public companies. So these are 70% of all the MA transactions came from these companies. And here you see it in a timeline for the big companies, and you see that they have different strategies. Hansa nearly buys every year a company. And they have a strategy to look for companies in Germany or in the Nordic countries. Inission is looking for the Nordic countries, or yet now the newest one, Lithuania, they acquired this year. And Note and even Scanfil and Kitron, they look more international for companies in UK, Bulgaria, Malaysia, Italy. So this is more widespread acquisitions. And I put some other on the list as well, which I thought are noteworthy to mention. This is Evertiq from Denmark. They are a huge number in Denmark, but not in the Nordic countries in total. But they're very active in acquisition and buying as well. So they bought a company, they get bought by a private equity, but then they bought another company in Denmark in 2022, and they opened up a new site in the USA starting this year. Another thing, GPV bought Enix in 2022. I think most of you will know that because this was a really huge acquisition. Some others as well. Evertiq System bought Säffle Instruments from Sweden, and Incap bought Penatronics, a bigger EMS in the USA. And you also have seen it on the exhibition floor because Nordic Engineering Partner is not longer Nordic Engineering Partner. They have a big Secor logo on the wall, so they are part from Secor since last autumn. What we see in general with acquisitions is that for some years ago, it was more buying production space and orders and customers. And now we see a switch to more competencies you don't have in your company before. It's like buying mechanics, for example, or engineering knowledge. Okay, how is the development of the Nordic public revenues? And all Nordic public EMS suffered significant revenue losses in 2024 compared to 2023. If we compare the first half year 24 to the second half year, some of the companies were able to reduce their losses, like GPV, Scanfil or Kitron. Some other had greater losses than before, like Note or Hansa. Norbit and Incap, they were able to further expand their growth. And if we compare now the second half year 24 with the first half year 25, all the public EMS except Incap recorded revenue growth. Inission is missing on this list because when we published our half-year survey, they hadn't published their figures for the half year, so there is no number included for them. But compared to Western Europe and even total Europe, the public EMS are doing a better job. They are in a better position, they grow better. And if you look especially at Secor, the only company on this list who is not from one of the Nordic countries, they are outstanding, and business with the segments medicine and military seems to help if you focus on that. Okay.
Thank you. So now we look at the development of the inventories of this public EMS by quarter, and this is shown as percentage of annual turnover or revenue. And what you can see is, okay, we are looking here now at 2022, 2023. So we look back a little bit in the past, and as you all know, in this time we saw strong growth of the EMS companies. This was also influenced by the supply chain situation, which was quite tight. So the customers and the EMS, they all stocked up their inventories to be able to serve the customers, the end customers. And therefore the inventory levels were very high in 2022, 2023. It's by quarter. It's a calculated value here that we used. And what you can see, the red line in the middle, this is the average line. And that you see when you see over the quarters, okay, it's all around 20, 25, 27 and so on. So it's at a 25, 26% level. And generally speaking, this is a very high value. This is higher than it was in the years before Corona. And it's not so good for the companies to have a very high inventory. So this situation should change. And how it developed in the time afterwards, we will see at the next slide. So here is the development of the total inventories of the public EMS in percentage of the revenue for the starting in the first quarter 23 until the second quarter 2025. Okay, you see a lot of zigzag lines, so there are it changes depending on the situation of the company, when orders come in and so on. But overall, the red line again is the average. We see a downwards trend. This is going from 26 on the first quarter 2023 down to around 20%, and this is also needs to be mentioned. It's percentage of annual turnover. So when the turnover is slower, of course, also the share of inventory is higher. So it depends on how much the factory is used at the moment. And this is important when we look at the next slide. This is now an overview for total Europe. So Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and so on. So we see in most of the countries a decline from the end of 24 to the end of June 25. So it's going down. That's positive. It's a small change, but in absolute change, not in comparison to the revenue, it's a bigger change. So overall, we are seeing a positive development. However, we see that we are still quite above the baseline. The red line is the 2015 to 2019 average of 15%. So we are still very much above this average. And yeah, of course, it's easier to build up inventory, as you know, than to reduce it again. So it still needs focus from the companies to get down back to normal levels. Now, okay, we saw inventories. This is now the prognosis. How is the EMS industry going to develop? And as I mentioned earlier, it's not the same everywhere. So the red columns are 2025 and the blue columns are 2026. So Germany, Austria and the DACH region, as well as Central Eastern Europe, as Mareike mentioned the reasons earlier, are seeing negative growth, as I may say so, for 2025. In other countries like Switzerland, Benelux, France, it's already positive. And however, for 2026, the companies are very confident that there will be a lot of recovery. So we see a lot of double-digit growth prognosed for 2026. For example, Germany plus 16.8 and so on. However, yes, this is a prognosis. Let's see what's really going to happen. Now, on the next slide, you see the total market EMS Europe from 2013 to 2024. Important here is that the numbers that we show are significantly higher than of the half-year revenue because it's the total market. And if you look at the 2024 column, you see 73%. This is real data that we have collected. Okay, so this is a very good coverage of real data. So it's quite accurate. And what you can see in total 2024, it is a minus 4.7 to 2023 for West and Eastern Europe. If you divide it into the Western Europe, you are with minus 10.9%, And if you look into Eastern Europe, it's plus 2.8%. So this is a little, how should I say, unusual. So why is Eastern Europe growing while Western is declining actually? But there is a reason behind that. This is important to understand, and I would like to show you on the next slide. The reason behind that is that when we cover Central Eastern Europe, we also look into Foxconn. Foxconn does a lot of revenue there, and they especially, so it's about 2.5 billion euros revenue over there. And what they build is data centers, which are very much driven by the recent development of AI and so on. So these are outliers, which are very big, which drove the market in Eastern Europe. And if you look on the right-hand side, there you see the market development if you do not include Foxconn into the market. And then the picture is quite similar. It's for East and West, negative 11%. So that explains the difference between East and West. Overall, not such a good year for the EMS industry, 2024.
Ja, då sammanfattar vi det hela. Halvårsrapporten visar fortfarande ingen återhämtning. Marknaden ligger nere med minus 8,1% för alla deltagare av vår studie. Men våra deltagarna är lite mer positiv än i början på året när vi hade vår analys med rapporten 74. De såg en liten förbättring för andra halvåret 75. Och det resultaten som jag visade med frågan om ordersituationen stödjer denna bilden. De nordiska länderna och särskilt Sverige klarar sig fortfarande bra jämfört med övriga Europa. Det beror delvis på de stora börsnoterade EMS som står bättre där till resten av Europa. Men de också står för en tydligt marknadskoncentration. Om du ser på Sverige, där 20 företag har en marknadsandel av 75% och de 20 största 90%. Det materialet som de byggde upp efter coronan och som ligger i stora mängder i lager skapar problem med bundna kapital, men den har tydligen minskat. Vi får regelbundna förfrågan när situationen blir bättre. Tyvärr måste jag säga, det är inte 2075. Det kommer kanske en liten förbättring under andra halvåret, men kanske. Dock, som Christoph just visade, förväntar sig deltagarna av vår halvårsrapporten en tvåsiffrig tillväxt på nästan 12%. Så det är förhoppningsvis lite lys på horisonten. No, das war zu schnell. Okay, now it's only our turn to thank our supporters who help us with the crowdfunding system to support our work. It's a lot of work collecting all the data and follow up to all the 2,350 EMS companies in Europe. We need every time new supporters, so feel free. And if you have, this is a problem with me with Swedish and English. If you have questions now, you can ask now or come to us later on the stage or at our stand. We are open to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tack så mycket. Då tackar vi ni båda. Thank you very much. Thank you. And do you know which number your table
111.
What?
111.
111. 111. Ja, das ist gut. Dankeschön.
Ja.
you.